So you really have to see this video of a Fox News host admitting that conservatives are total and complete hypocrites. And many times I've said, if Obama did this, if Hillary did this, they wouldn't just be calling for their impeachment. They'd be calling for their heads. Example, if Chelsea Clinton had 5% of the role that Ivanka Trump has had in the Trump administration, if Chelsea was sitting with other world leaders at the G20, sitting in for our Secretary of State, Fox News would be 24/7 demanding Hillary Clinton be tarred and feathered. If Obama at a press briefing played a 5-minute propaganda video like Donald Trump did on Monday this week during a 100-year pandemic, they would be calling for Barack Obama's head. And when Trump has now gone full authoritarian, claiming that he has the absolute authority to open or close a state at his demand, that governors must do what he says, any supposedly small government conservative who believes in states' rights or federalism and the Constitution and says nothing is a gigantic, glaring hypocrite. And Bret Baier on Fox News called it out. Some Fox News people like Brit Hume have been sort of just waving off Trump's growing belligerent authoritarianism, but Bret Baier admits it. So good for Bret. Check this out. Bret is asked, how do you see the battle between Trump and governors going in the future over this issue of opening and closing states? Here is what Bret Baier says.
How do you see this shaping up across the country with the president, with his fiery statements last night and the governors trying to pour a little cool water on it?
First of all, the Constitution is pretty clear, and constitutional scholars will say that this is not the president flicking on the switch. It's the governors and the local authorities that have that going forward. I think that there's a hypocrisy here in that, one, if President Obama had said those words that you heard from President Trump, that the authority is total with the presidency, conservatives' heads would have exploded across the board. Two, a week ago, there was a lot of coverage of saying, why isn't there a national stay-at-home order?
The Constitution is clear. Trump doesn't have the authority. The governors have the authority. That's the correct analysis. But Bret goes into the hypocrisy, which is what I like. If Obama ever said something like this, right-wingers would be slamming Obama's authoritarian one world government, whatever. And in fact, many of them were calling Barack Obama a dictator anyway. They're silent right now. And Trump is increasingly, the things that Obama was accused of being, Trump increasingly is. And very few people are actually calling it out. So, of course, disclaimer, one moment of truth and clarity on Fox does not change that they continue to big picture be water carriers for the disinformation of Trump through the coronavirus pandemic. But here's the really scary thing about Fox News to me. If they are successfully able to spin this presidency into something that maintains 40% support for Donald Trump, they can spin anything to 40% support. And what I mean by that is this is by far the most outrageous presidency we've had in the modern media era. George W. Bush was a disaster. He was a warmonger. I'm not praising George W. Bush. But George W. Bush was much more of a standard right-winger. And the right-wing media playbook for how to defend a standard right-winger is very well written. There was nothing new there. We know that that will have roughly 40% support. Fox News has been able to evolve on the fly and figure out, how do we defend anything Donald Trump does? And if they can do it with Trump and keep him at 40% support, I fear that there is no president so crazy that Fox News would not be able to help them maintain 40% support, no matter what they do, no matter what they say. And we talk about things are much different now than they were for Nixon in the 1970s. Maybe if Nixon had Fox News in the 70s, he wouldn't have had to resign. Maybe if Trump didn't have something like Fox News and the entire apparatus that's around it, maybe he would have suffered more consequences for his harebrained actions so far. That's a really scary idea. And what Fox has proven is that they can reframe almost anything and still keep 40% of the country saying, Trump's doing a good job. And that should scare the hell out of all of us. And it's reminiscent of George Orwell's 1984, but it's also reminiscent of the kind of manufacture of consent outlined in George Orwell's other novel, Animal Farm, which I recently reread, and many elements of what is going on increasingly today with Fox News and Trump and media coverage and the virus makes me think of Animal Farm, and that's very, very bad. One of our sponsors today is a game called Lawgivers, a turn-based political simulation game for PC, iOS, and Android. If you've ever wanted to start a political party or run for office or shape the destiny of our country, here's your chance. I've been having a ton of fun with the game. You do get to experience legislative democracy up close, and the dynamics of the game are really impressive. You make election promises to your constituents. It's up to you whether you keep those promises when you're in office. All of the laws you pass affect your country's happiness and safety, healthcare, environment. You can abolish laws that are already in place. You can ratify the Constitution. You decide if you want the government to be a healthy democracy or authoritarian tyranny. You can be corrupt and take bribes. Political assassinations are part of the game. It's nuts, actually. It's a really good time. It doesn't get old because you'll never play it the same way twice. This is not some cheesy free-to-play game. It's very clear that a lot of time went into the development. It has very positive reviews on Steam and in the app stores, 4.5 stars or higher on all platforms. Go to davidpakman.com/game, which is where you can watch the trailer, download the game for Steam, iOS, and Android. That's davidpakman.com/game.